Hello again, everybody. WJHG Sports Director Scott Rossman alongside anchor reporter Hayden Smith coming at you with 7+ Sports Talk. And Hayden, today our subject, a young man who seems to be a star on the rise within the circles of professional race car driving.
Yeah, that's Mosley alum Jake Finch, and he's definitely had a very good young career here so far between the ARCA Menard series and other national series that and regional series that he's competed in here. As a 20-year-old, just kind of outstanding how quickly of a rise that he has had in this sport. A lot of it has to do with the fact that he is very talented, and also the fact that his father, James Finch, was very heavily involved in the NASCAR Cup Series.
Yeah, for those not aware, James Finch, a local businessman who is in the construction business, road paving, a lot of construction concerns. But he was also very active in race car driving, and at one point owned a cup car and competed on that series. It was more Busch Grand National and back in the early days, but then they graduated to a season on the Cup circuit. I just think that the costs and inability to keep a sponsor to kind of pay the bills. You're talking about even back 20 years ago, it was a 7-figure buy-in
Easily
to stay on the Cup circuit, and James just didn't want to continue to foot that bill. However, from, as you pointed out, for Jake, it's absolutely in his blood. He grew up in a racing garage, quite literally. And the 2023 Mosley graduate played some baseball for the Dolphins and was pretty good at it. However, as we're finding out, he's hoping to make a career for himself in the world of speed tracks.
Exactly. And again, I caught up with Jake just in February down at Daytona International Speedway whenever he was competing in the General Tower 200 for the ARCA Menard series during the speed weeks. I followed him throughout the practice, the qualifying, and of course the race where he was unfortunately unable to win, though he led there in those final couple of laps.
Yeah, 2 laps to go, had the lead, didn't he?
Yeah. Yes, very unfortunate. Wrecked with one of his own teammates and ended up finishing top 15. So just unfortunate for him. But again, I had a great conversation with Jake. We talked a few days before the race kind of about his life growing up in the sport, especially alongside his father, who is a big reason for the passion that he has in this sport, Scott. And again, like you mentioned earlier, James Finch, Jake's father, starting up his own racing team, Phoenix Racing, in 1990. So yeah, it was a very cool experience for me also to be able to kind of talk along with Jake.
And as we go to record this podcast, we do so the day after a rather big announcement in terms of Jake's future in racing came out. Let the folks know about that.
Yeah, exactly. Jake signing with Junior Motorsports. With anybody that's not familiar with the sport of NASCAR, the National Series, that is Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s team. They're in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. He will drive their number 9 car for 5 races here throughout the summer and fall of the season. The first race will be, I believe, July 11th, which will be at Echo Park Speedway in Atlanta at the old Atlanta Speedway. So super cool news there for Jake to be able to compete once again in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. We'll talk here in a little bit more about his first time competing in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series last year. Yeah,
and Jake, he'll race also at Bristol, Charlotte Motor Speedway, and Talladega just before Halloween. The word is that this signing comes after Kevin Harvick started to notice the up-and-coming 20-year-old Jake Finch driving the car. So some very big news indeed this week in terms of Jake Finch's future. Some folks say, well, that's a seat that maybe you can buy, and that it's a buy-in, so to speak. I don't know about any of that, but I know this. It is a fantastic opportunity for a 20-year-old driver to get the kind of experience that he's going to get in the coming months ahead.
Yeah, whenever you're catching the eye of somebody like Kevin Harvick, you're doing something right in the sport. Again, anybody that doesn't know Kevin Harvick, one of the best racers here recently in the NASCAR Cup Series. So that's awesome for Jake. So let's get into my conversation that I had with Jake whenever I was in Daytona. I asked him kind of about his relationship with his father growing up, but also why he really wanted to kind of follow in his footsteps, but get into the driver's seat of a race car. So here's what he said about that.
I always looked up to my dad, obviously, and still do. He's probably the biggest inspiration in my life. So just being around him my whole life and knowing how much it mattered to him. And then, yeah, I just started to, like other drivers and kind of pick onto it, like everybody else does. And luckily enough, with Dad's involvement in racing, I just started, through that, started racing go-karts and eventually became better and better. And now I'm at where I'm at now, so.
And like I said earlier, racing literally in his blood.
Yeah, again, no question. I mean, Jake mentioning it right there, he started at a very young age, and I mean, even through as a 20-year-old, he's had years of experience, which is kind of what you need in this sport. If you want to be successful, you got to start at a young age, and you got to be able to continue that throughout your early 20s and your late 20s.
And youngsters get the opportunity to literally go from go-karts to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. You can start at 7, 8 years old and start experiencing speed behind the wheel and all that. And that's something that Jake did. And again, the younger you start, the better it is. It does help to have a father who was involved in racing and has some means to it, but you still have to be able to get behind that wheel and prove that you can drive a race car on a variety of different levels.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, like you mentioned, Scott, with Jake kind of being alongside the ride with his dad growing up, he kind of had the opportunity to somewhat travel alongside him, though Jake also says, being a little bit of a young kid, his dad didn't necessarily want him around there all the time. He'll mention a little bit about that. But he also got to meet different people and kind of develop some of those relationships within the sport. So I asked Jake a little bit about being able to grow up around the sport of racing. Now, tell me a little bit about, you've kind of mentioned it here a few times already, but growing up around the sport and kind of going to maybe different tracks along with your dad and being able to experience all that as a young kid.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously super cool. I didn't get to go that much. My dad was super busy. And I was playing baseball mainly growing up, so I would have baseball and my dad would be racing, and he didn't really want to drag me along, and I was kind of a delinquent back then, so I don't blame him whatsoever. But yeah, just it was always cool, and it's funny because I see a lot of the people that I grew up around, and they give me crap for being so young and being around, and so it just feels like a big family. You know what I mean? I've been here since I was little, and the same core guys are pretty much still involved. So it's just really fun environment to be around compared to anything else that I've been a part of. So yeah, I think just growing up around it has created a good bond with everybody.
So important to, again, have that foundation in racing.
Exactly. And again, we've mentioned it a few times already. It definitely helps that he had his father alongside him to be able to kind of be there along for the ride and meet some great people, which Jake and I, right after that question, I asked him who his favorite driver was just in all of racing. And he said it's actually kind of funny because I'm still pretty young, so my favorite driver is Chase Elliott, who, if anybody in the NASCAR fandom knows, Chase Elliott, still a young driver in the NASCAR Cup Series. And we laughed about that for a little bit because he said everybody usually says those other guys, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon,
Bill Elliott.
Bill Elliott. And he said he actually got to meet Chase whenever he was about 10 years old, whenever Chase was kind of still up and coming, so he thought that was pretty cool and a really cool experience for him.
It is noteworthy that NASCAR, and in particularly the top two levels of the sport, have gone through a real youth movement, say within the last 5 to 10 years. There is the old guard, and when I say that, I'm talking about the Tony Stewarts and the
Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy Johnson. I was thinking six-time champ. That core group, which followed, they were part of a youth movement from the previous core group, the Richard Petty's and the Bill Elliott's and those types. But there really has been a youth movement, and you do see a lot of early 20-somethings, and occasionally, like in Jake's case, a teenage driving on the second level. You know, what used to be the Busch Grand National or the Xfinity Series. A lot of people know those names. But also some very early 20-somethings now driving on the Cup level.
Exactly. Carson Hocevar, one of those names at the NASCAR Cup level, who's just kind of exploded onto the scene here recently. So again, like you said, Scott, a lot of youngsters kind of getting into the game. And I did talk a little bit to Jake about kind of racing isn't your normal high school sport where you're going to kind of do all the normal things that a high schooler would do and be able to kind of get to a certain level into college or whatever. So I asked Jake a little bit about how he was able to fully get into the sport of racing.
I started taking it pretty serious when I was like 13. I was racing a little bit when I was like 11 or 12, but yeah, I would say like 13, 14, freshman year of high school, I would say was when I started kicking off, and then COVID. Racing was still pretty much going, so then that's kind of what, you know, got me really going was COVID, and then yeah, just kept going from there.
Yeah, now racing, obviously, that's not like, it's not your typical, especially as a high schooler wanting to start racing. You don't go to college and get a scholarship and race for a few years. You don't get NIL money like that in college. Exactly. But so tell me a little bit about how you get to the point where you're at today in the ARC Menard Series.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a pretty weird dynamic, really. You know what I mean? It's so much different than any other sport, like you said. I think the traveling and stuff was kind of not hard for me, but it was very different. You know what I mean? In high school, I missed a lot of activities and missed prom my senior year because I was racing. Luckily, I won, so that was cool. But just things like that, like prom, homecoming, and you know, baseball games and practice. You know, racing is a pretty adult schedule. You know what I mean? And I think the biggest thing about racing that I would say for anybody, you know, growing up or whatever, I think it helps you mature so much. Racing does compared to other sports, because everybody on my team is significantly older than me. And then, you know, the schedules are pretty, like I said, you know, adult schedules, and you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then speed weeks is all throughout the week. And then, yeah, you get interviews when you're like 13, you know, compared to baseball and stuff like that. And so I just think it helped me mature a lot. And then, you know, you miss out on a lot of things, but, you know, risk versus reward, I think, is beneficial for me so far. But yeah, it's been a cool journey so far, just to keep that going. You know, winning makes up for a lot of the things you miss out on.
You had some video in there of Jake. I want to say that was his freshman or sophomore year at Mosley. He was in that simulator, and that was a big time simulator. He could call up a variety of different tracks and conditions, and that was in his apartment, which was located at Phoenix Construction, you know, in Lynn Haven. He was literally living, his main living room had the racing simulator in there. And what 13, 14-year-old isn't going to spend a large chunk of time? So he's experienced, quote unquote, in a sense, that he spent a lot of time in a simulator. And, you know, some people might scoff at that, but, you know, airline pilots spend a lot of time in simulators. That's how they train. It's how they gear up for, you know, unexpected situations and how they react to it. And again, Jake, you know, is that an advantage? Heck yeah, it is. Can a lot of kids in high school, can their parents afford to put a racing simulator in their bedroom or their house? No, they can't. But Jake took advantage of that. Mm-hmm. He's kind of, you know, you get your foot in the door, and now he's kind of kicked it down, and he is proving that he is worthy of, you know, a seat on this level and a seat on that level, and now a seat, you know, on the O'Reilly Auto Parts Center, which, you know, again, to put it in baseball terms, it's AAA baseball. He's, you know, he's one step from the show, and that's just a very cool thing to be on the sidelines watching.
Yeah, and Scott, you kind of mentioned it right there on how Jake's kind of been able to move up from series to series and series and be successful in some of these. He started racing the ARC Menard Series, which is kind of 3 steps below the NASCAR Cup Series. You go NASCAR O'Reilly Truck Series, and then the ARCA Series is not really in the national one, but it's more regional based. He started racing there in 2023 and has been racing there since. And just last year in 2024, he was able to win his first ARC Menard Series race at Talladega. So I asked Jake a little bit about that experience to be able to win and dominate at one of the greatest tracks in America. 2024 as well, you get your first ARCA Menard Series win at Talladega. Kind of tell me a little bit about that experience and kind of maybe the culmination of everything that you've worked for finally paying off.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, all the hard work was definitely a big thing, but I had a pretty bad heartbreak here in Daytona in February that year, and we led, like I said, 90% of the race or whatever, and got wrecked on the last lap, and other unfortunate events happened. But yeah, then that was pretty gut-wrenching for me because, like I said, Daytona has always been one of the first places I've grown to, and to come out here for my first race, I was super nervous before, and to come out there and dominate like we did, it was felt super rewarding until it wasn't. So that was pretty hard for me. And going to Talladega, my crew chief at the time, Shannon Rush, was a really big mental help to me, and just trying to stay locked in for that. And luckily, we led every single lap and won the race, and that was really cool because it was 15 years prior to that. My dad won the Cup race, which was his first Cup race. So yeah, a lot of emotions there, and leading every lap was really, really, really cool. And yeah, it's so cool to be able to win at Talladega, all the history there, and it's just a really cool racetrack.
Talladega, like you said, one of the fabled race tracks. I actually got to drive 3 laps on that. Part of the Richard Petty driving experience. We mentioned that in a previous podcast when NBC was taking on televising the NASCAR Cup Series for half the year. They allowed a lot of the sports directors to have that opportunity. So got to get up there and drive on that track, and that was a great experience. And no doubt for Jake, it's now something nobody can ever take away from him. He has a win at Talladega. Now, granted, there are bigger wins to be had there, and I'm sure that that's on his bucket list.
Yeah, again, Daytona this year, back in February, that he was definitely right there on the doorstep. That's one of his favorite tracks. He's always wanted to... 2
laps to go, and then he has a win at Daytona and a win at Talladega. How cool is that?
2 of the super speedways on the circuit. So, yeah, that definitely a tough break for him. But, again, no question, Jake has still had a ton of success. Just last year, he got the call-up to race in the Xfinity Series, which is now the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, to race at Dover for Hendrick Motorsports, which is one, if not the best racing team in all of NASCAR, even across other sports as well. So I kind of talked to Jay a little bit about being able to race for Hendrick Motorsports and Rick Hendrick.
Yeah, honestly, it's probably the coolest moment of my life. You know what I mean? I've always looked up to Mr. Hendrick. He's probably the next biggest idol in my life besides my dad, and just a great person, and he's just a really good person to look up to, and the way he handles his business, and not only his business but his life, and the way he handles his family, and he just does such a great job, and a good person to idolize. And besides that, I mean, his company over there at Hendrick Motorsports is just so well established, and they won the Cup championship last year, and they're just a dominant race team. And so it's always been a dream of mine to drive for them. I always say it was kind of like I got to play shortstop for the Yankees for one game. And so, yeah, it was just try to take it all in. I was there a lot, meeting all the people. There's so many great employees, right? So many people that make up something like that. Any good company or sports team or whatever has so many good people that, aren't always recognized. And just all those people over there at HMS do such a great job. And it's honestly unbelievable how good of a job and organized and everything they do over there. So to be able to go over there and wear those colors and represent Hendrick cars was a great experience, and hopefully get to do it again. And yeah, but just what a good moment for me, for sure.
Hayden, when you listen to Jake, he comes off like a veteran race car driver, like part of a team and all that. Seems wise beyond his years, which is kind of a compliment to the teachers at Mosley High School. And I don't know where he went to middle school and grade school, but there's got to be some teachers. There have to be some teachers, listening and thinking, oh wow, we did a good job there, because he's a really good representative for his team and for his family, and for our area in general. When people beyond our region hear a young racer like that talk, and they say, oh, hey, that's from the Panhandle, that's from Panama City or Lynn Haven, Florida, that he's representing us well.
Exactly. Yeah, you would not think that he is just a 20-year-old racer. It's unbelievable to hear kind of how he kind of carries himself and how he's able to obviously talk in front of a camera. He's done it multiple times there already. So yeah, that's pretty awesome for Jake. And again, his journey is still very much in the early phases. He's still got a long way to go in this sport because you can race for quite a long time as long as your body and your mental health can be able to take you as far as you can. But he's obviously aware that there's other people in the world that are younger than him that want to get into this sport. So I asked him a little bit on kind of what his advice would be to those kids that want to get into the sport of racing.
Take as much as you can in, right? I think it's a super cool opportunity to be able to do what I'm blessed to be able to do. And a lot of things that a lot of people would, love to be able to do is to drive a race car, especially the kinds of race cars they get to drive and the level. So yeah, I would say just take everything in and yeah, just listen as much as you can. My dad always says you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So try to listen as much as I can, and yeah, just be yourself is the biggest thing, and believe in yourself. I think the biggest thing I would say is just trust the process, believe in yourself, and trust the people around you. And I think if I could have done a little bit better job, then maybe be a little bit better now. But trying to work on that every day. So we'll see.
That's funny. My father, God rest his soul, used to say the same thing. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should listen twice as much as you talk. Unfortunately, I've probably not lived up to that, but I try.
Yeah, I say we're all pretty, yeah, could do a little bit better than that here and then.
But
yeah,
it is, it's great advice, again, from a young man who is wise beyond his years. And boy, what a great future he has in auto racing. And it's exciting for everybody in our area, in our region, to be able to watch him and hopefully cheer him on.
Exactly, yeah. Again, whenever we did the podcast on him last year for the first time, whenever he got that call up to race in the Xfinity Series, I immediately started kind of following him along and trying to watch him throughout some of the races that he raced in the ARCA Menard Series. Of course, I got to see him race in Salem, Indiana at one point before I was able to come down here to the Panhandle. So again, I can't wait to see where Jake's future goes, because I definitely think at some point he could get that full-time seat in the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series, because this is only a part-time gig with Junior Motorsports. So I think if he is able to continue kind of this streak of success, there's no question that the future is his.
And again, all that sound from Daytona well before he signed this deal with Junior Motorsports. So we'll be talking to him about that, and we'll, of course, update you on air and perhaps within a future podcast. But we certainly appreciate Jake Finch for taking the time with us. And like you said, oh so close there at Daytona. But a lot of big races ahead, including now 5 on the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series with Junior Motorsports. Thank you to Jake. Thank you to Hayden and our sponsor, Bill Bird Kia. We appreciate them. That's going to do it for this edition of 7 Plus Sports Talk. I'm Scott, and for Hayden, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you later.